Okay, good evening. Time for some more Secret History of the World. So we're up to chapter 16 tonight, 16 and 17. These are a little bit shorter than last time, um, so it won't be a 2 hour reading this time. Um, so chapter 16 has the multi-part title as usual: The Tyranny of the Fathers, the Gnostics, and the Platonists, The Murder of Hypatia, Attila and Shamanism, and A Touch of Zen are the four parts to it. So, let's get started. In the secret teachings of the schools, the life and death of the sun god marked the halfway point of the secret history. Although it was unnoticed by the official chroniclers of the day, at the end of time, this event will come to be seen as the great hinge on which history was turned. To many people living at the time, the magnitude of this event undoubtedly made it hard to get into perspective. After a long period of spiritual aridity, many now began to enjoy vivid, if atavistic, experience of the spirit worlds. Maybe some had an inkling of what the great revolution that had taken place in the spirit world actually was, but in the absence of the sort of unified institutional authority that the hierophants of the mystery schools had commanded, these new experiences were interpreted in a variety of ways. We see this in a proliferation of sects in the decades following the death of Jesus Christ. Many of the Gnostic texts are as old as the books of the New Testament, some with clear claims to validity. We have already touched on the Gospel of St. Thomas, with its more authentic versions of the sayings of Jesus, and the Pistis Sophia's account of the two Jesus children, and somewhat fragmentary text of the Acts of St. John offers a fascinating glimpse of the inner group practices of Jesus Christ. A circular dance is described. The principals first hold hands. Oh, I'm sorry. Where did I get principles? Wow, that was a. Okay, let me start that sentence again. The disciples first hold hands to form a circle, then whirl in a ring around Jesus Christ. In the liturgy that accompanies this dance, Jesus Christ is the initiator, and his interlocutor a candidate for initiation. Okay, we've got some dialogue, pseudo dialogue, some example. He doesn't really say. So, candidate, I would be saved. Christ, and I would save. Candidate, I would be loosed. Christ, and I would loosen. Candidate, I would be pierced. Christ, I would pierce. Candidate, I would eat. Christ, I would be eaten. The Acts of John use language in a paradoxical, even absurdist way. It will become easier to understand as we proceed. And then a little bit more. Candidate, I have no house, and I have houses. I have no place, and I have places. I have no temple, and I have temples. Only fragments of the next bit have survived, but they seem to refer to some Osirian Christian mystery of death and resurrection, after which Christ says, What I am now seen to be, that I am not, but what I am thou shalt see when thou comest. If thou hadst known how to suffer, thou wouldst have had the power not to suffer. Know then suffering, and thou shalt have the power not to suffer. Okay. Um, it's interesting that he immediately goes into Hinduism and Krishna because that reminds me of one of the Four Noble Truths um, of Buddhism. Okay. A Hindu dance in honor of Krishna is described as a circular sunwise dance. The dancers twist and turn and wheel around the sun god in imitation of the planets. This would This should alert us to the fact that the Acts of St. John is inspired by a cosmic vision of Jesus Christ as the sun god returned. The Gospel of St. Philip refers to 5 rituals, the last and greatest being the ritual of the bridal chamber. Is this a ritual sexual practice like the ones that took place in the temples of Egypt, Greece, and Babylon? Later, the church would want to emphasize the uniqueness of Christian revelation and distance Jesus Christ and his teachings from what went before. But to the early Christians, it was only natural to see Christianity as growing out of what had gone before and as a fulfillment of ancient prophecies. Many early Christians understood Christianity in terms of what they had been taught in the mystery schools of Egypt, Greece, and Rome. The early church father Clement of Alexandria may have known people who had known the apostles. Clement and his pupil Origen, believed in reincarnation, for example. They taught more advanced students what they called the Disciplina Arcani, devotional practices which today we would classify as magic. Early Christian leaders like Origen and Clement were erudite men participating in the intellectual advances of their age. The most exciting of these found representative expression in Neoplatonism. Plato had pretty comprehensively converted a mind before matter experience of the world into concepts. What happened in the 2nd century AD was that what we now call Neoplatonists began to develop Plato's ideas into a living philosophy, a philosophy of life, even a religion with its own spiritual practices. It is important to remember that while we consider Plato in a dryly academic way for his followers in the centuries after his death, his texts had the status of scripture. Neoplatonists saw themselves not as originating ideas but writing commentaries, making clear what Plato really meant. Passages which are today considered merely as rather obtrusive exercises in abstract logic were used by practicing Neoplatonists in their devotions. They were concerned with describing real spiritual experience. In On the Delay in Divine Justice, Plutarch, who was heavily influenced by Neoplatonism, describes what different spirits look like as they can be seen beginning their after-death journey. The deceased are said to be surrounded with a flame-like envelope, but some were like the purest full moon light, emitting one smooth, continuous, and even color. Others were quite mottled, extraordinary sights, dappled with livid spots like adders, and others had faint scratches. We're supposed to be going into a ad. I don't know if we are. Oh, there's an ad at the bottom. I guess it's just a bar. I never noticed that before. So I will continue. Plotinus, the greatest Neoplatonist, say that 3 times real fast. In the greatest Neoplatonist in the Alexandrian school was a practicing mystic. His pupil Porphyry reported seeing his master in ecstatic raptures, unified with the one, quote unquote, several times. Plotinus said that Porphyry, perhaps a bit said of Porphyry, perhaps a bit dismissively, that he had not achieved this once. Neoplatonists who came after them, Iamblichus and Jamblichus, I misread that, put great emphasis on the importance of theurgic, that is to say, godly magical practices. Iamblichus leaving detailed descriptions of his visions. Oh, and now we're in an ad that you can't see, where you can't see me, or some people can't see me. So I'll go back to the beginning of that sentence when we get there. In the meantime, cheers. Where would I go back to? Neoplatonists. I'll go back to Neoplatonists, Iamblichus. When we get there in a few more seconds. Okay, so it says we are back. So I'll reread that last sentence. Neoplatonists who came after them, Iamblichus and Jamblichus, that's what it says. It's the same, just with an I and a J, put great emphasis on the importance of theurgic, that is to say, godly magical practices. Iamblichus leaving detailed descriptions of his visions. Plotinus elaborated on extremely complex metaphysic and elaborated an extremely complex metaphysic of emanations of the kind we touched on in Chapter 1. Neoplatonism influenced other traditions, especially by its systematic approach, particularly the Kabbalah and Hermeticism. Hermeticism and the Kabbalah are viewed by some scholars as respectively Egyptian and Hebrew flavored Neoplatonism. But in the secret history, the Hermetic and Kabbalistic writings that began to appear at this time are understood as the first written down systematized expressions of ancient and largely oral traditions. The Hermetica, purported to have originated with Hermes Trismegistus, an ancient Egyptian sage, but were written down in Greek and collected at this time in 42 volumes. Yuri Stoyanov, a distinguished researcher at the Warburg Institute, recently confirmed to me that most scholars now accept their genuine Egyptian origins. The Hermetica were genially tolerant of other traditions, no doubt partly because of an underlying assumption that all traditions addressed the same planetary gods and opened up the way to the same spirit worlds. That's kind of like, oh, I'm blanking on the word right now. Anyway, moving on. In fact, it is possible to draw parallels between the numbered emanations of Plotinus, the gods of the Hermetica, and the spheres of heaven as described in the Pistis Sophia. In the Kabbalah, the emanations from the cosmic mind, the Sephiroth, are sometimes thought of as forming a sort of tree as they descend, the Sephirotic tree. The allegorical interpretation of Scripture that emerged with the Jewish scholar Philo of Alexandria opened up the shared structure of all religions. St. Paul hinted at different orders of angels, not only angels and archangels, but also seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, mights, powers, principalities. He is alluding to a system he evidently expected his readers to understand. This system was set out explicitly by St. Paul's pupil Dionysius. Dionysius? The Areopagite. Um, sorry, I've never seen that name. Just have never seen it, or I don't remember seeing it. The 9 orders he described can be equated with the branches on the Sephirothic tree, and with the different orders of gods and spirits in the ancient polytheistic astronomical religions. For example, the powers, quote unquote, of St. Paul should be equated with the gods of the solar system of the Greeks and Romans, the powers of light being the spirits of the sun, and the powers of darkness being the gods of the moon and the planets. The Sorry, that word was right on the tip of my tongue and then it slipped away again. The Jewish scholar Rebecca Kenta has even compared the ascent through the gates of wisdom on the Kabbalistic tree of life with Sufi teachings and made connections between the Sephiroth and the chakras of Hindu tradition. All idealism, the religious systems of all cultures, see creation in terms of a descending series of emanations from the cosmic mind. But what is distinctly esoteric is this identifying of these emanations with the spirits of the stars and planets on the one hand, and occult physiology on the other. It is this that leads to astrology, alchemy, magic, and practical techniques for achieving altered states. It is important to keep bearing in mind that we are not here talking about piled up abstractions, but lived experience. The 9 angelic hierarchies were sometimes divided up into three parts, and when St. Paul talked of being raised to the third heaven, he meant that he had been initiated to such a high level that he had had direct personal experience of the exalted spiritual beings, the seraphim, cherubim and thrones. The bride stripped bare by her bachelors, even even by Marcel Deschamps. What? Stripped bare, the bachelors reveal their planetary identity. Oh, I think this is referring to the next. The It's a picture. I don't get it. So this is a painting or well, an art piece, whatever, called "The Bride Stripped Bare" by her bachelors. Um, anyway, I've never seen it before, never heard of it before. It's very odd. I'll show it to you here. The Bride Stripped Bare. Makes no sense to me, the name versus the imagery. That's something I would have to study for a while to get anything out of, I think. Okay, moving on. Omnist. Omnist, that's the word. I knew it would come to me eventually. Um, some of what he was talking about earlier, you could be described as omnism. All religions have some part of the truth, but no religion has a monopoly on truth. Is basically the way I would describe it. Anyway, Christianity was forged out of initiatic experiences and beliefs like these. The greatest of the church fathers, St. Augustine, was an initiate of a late flowering Persian mystery school called Manichaeism. Mani, or Mani, Mani, was born in 215 in the region that today we call Iraq. At the age of only 12, a being appeared to him. This mysterious being he came to call the Twin revealed to Mani a great hidden mystery, the role of evil in the history of humankind. He learned of the intertwining of the forces of darkness in the creation of the cosmos. He learned, too, that in the great cosmic battle between good and evil, the forces of evil virtually triumph. The cosmic nature of Mani's vision can also be seen in its syncretism. Sorry, not familiar with that. I, I get what it means, but syncretism, I'm not familiar with the word itself. In this account of so let me read that sentence again. The cosmic nature of Mani's vision can also be seen in its syncretism in his account of the great events of history and the exalted parts played by Zarathustra, the Buddha, the Hebrew prophets, and Jesus Christ. The universalism of initiates tends to worry local tyrants. The initiate's heightened awareness of the forces of evil is also always open to misinterpretation. Mani was protected by two successive kings, but their successor persecuted him, torturing and eventually crucifying him. Quote, I entered my innermost soul and beheld beyond my light and soul the light. End quote. Augustine's towering intellectual achievement was to give a comprehensive account of church doctrine in terms of Platonism. What is usually glossed over in conventional church history is that this account was based on the direct personal experience of the initiate. Augustine was himself seen with, quote, the mysterious eye of the soul, end quote, a brighter light than the light of the intellect. He is not only concerned with eternal abstractions. His Confessions, the title, show him tortured by a sense of time passing. In his often quoted phrase, quote, O Lord, make me chaste, but not yet, end quote. And also in his poignant cry in another moment of visionary experience, quote, O beauty so old and so new, too late have I loved thee. End quote. St. Augustine's sense of time passing carries over into an esoteric sense of history. Later, we will see the way in which he understood that the successive stages of the history of the world would unfold when we look at his prophecy of the founding of the city of God. This was also the age of the great Christian missionaries. Having been captured and sold into slavery, St. Patrick later went on a mission to spread the feeling for the sanctity of the human life that Jesus Christ had introduced into the stream of world history. He fought to abolish slavery and human sacrifice, but he was also a wizard in the tradition of Zarathustra and Merlin, a terrifying figure casting all the snakes out of Ireland with his wand, casting out demons and raising the dead. Christianity was readily accepted by the Celts. St. Patrick, overlaid with historical knowledge of the life and work of Jesus Christ, the Celts' cosmic prophecy of the return of the sun god. Celtic Christianity would happily intertwine Christian and pagan elements. In Celtic art, intertwining motifs would also stand for the interweaving waves of light that characterize the first stage of the mystical experience in all traditions. The fiercely independent Celts would continue to insist on the primacy of direct personal experience of the spirit worlds and would develop esoteric traditions independent of Rome. Some of the beliefs and practices of these and other early Christians would come to be dubbed heretical by the Roman Church. Of course, when people care deeply about the same things, when they share what the existentialist theologian Paul Tillich called ultimate concerns, they are sometimes incredibly sensitive to different shades of opinion. Differences of opinion may lead to murderous hatred, so that my greatest enemy is not the alien conqueror coming over the horizon with bloody tears carved into his cheeks, but a brother or sister I rub shoulders with in the congregation. Sometimes, too, many of the congregations will try to ban beliefs, as did the Emperor Augustus, not because they believe them to be false, but because they believe them to be true. The history of the founding of the Roman Church and its dissemination through the good offices of the dying Roman Empire has been written down by the Church and by its enemies. The Emperor Constantine claimed that in the middle of the night, before he went into battle against rebels, he had a dream in which Jesus Christ appeared to him and told him to put the sign of the cross on his battle flag, with the inscription, quote, "In this sign thou shalt conquer." End quote. Constantine obeyed, and the rebels were duly defeated. He declared Christianity the official religion of the empire, donating the Lateran Palace to the bishops of Rome. There were undoubted political benefits to this. The new form of consciousness that had been initiated in Jerusalem was spreading with great vigor through the empire, and Constantine capitalized on this by offering freedom to any slave who converted and 20 pieces of gold to any who were already free. As we have seen, the Romans had a cult of cruelty. The imposition of power by one man on another, taken to its furthest extremes, was exalted. The Romans were ruthless, and ruthlessness was a manly virtue. So the Christian exaltation of meekness and humility turned everything upside down and inside out. The Christians clearly knew of new joys of satisfaction, new ways of being in the world. Consider how strange meeting a Christian initiate must have seemed to a Roman. Here was a new form of consciousness. Here were people able to live inside their heads. They were lit up inside by an enthusiasm and a certainty about spiritual experience. It must have been as baffling and intriguing as it was hundreds of years later for a pygmy in Papua New Guinea to meet for the first time a European explorer. There were whole new worlds behind those eyes. Constantine may have hoped the rigorous new religion would help slow down the decline of the Roman Empire, but he remained anxious about a prophecy in the Sibylline oracles that Rome would again become the haunt of wolves and foxes. Okay, we have a picture, an interesting picture. Um, it says Exterstein in Germany. This ancient carving is a few paces away from an older carving of a Norse god hung on a tree, in a happy acceptance of the fact that Christianity grew out of pagan traditions. Note that esoteric understanding of the different bodies of the individual is alluded to in the fact that while the material body of Jesus Christ is being taken down from the cross, his spirit already rests in the arms of his Father. Okay. So I will bring up the picture and I'll have to blow it up a bit here. So here's somebody with him slung over his shoulder. I'm not sure what's going on with this guy up here. Nor do I understand what's going on down here. This is someone kneeling, or I don't know. I don't get what that's supposed to be down there. Anyway, um, hmm, that is a strange drawing, strange carving. I will have to study that a bit. Okay, we decided to try to thwart. He decided to try to thwart this prophecy by transferring the spirit of Rome to another location and founding an alternative capital. So from under a porphyry pillar, he dug up the Palladium, the ancient god-carved statue that, as we saw, had been carried from Troy for the founding of Rome. Then he reburied it at the site of the city that would be called Constantinople. It was buried under the same pillar, but now topped by a statue of the sun god, crowned with the nails from the true cross in the form of a sort of nimbus. This symbolism, incorporating initiatic teaching regarding the sun god, would have been understood by initiates of all religions, so it is perhaps slightly ironic that under the aegis of Constantine, the Church began to suppress initiatic teachings and to reduce its exoteric teachings to dogma. In 325, the Council of Nicaea, I'm always thinking it's 425, it's 325. The Council of Nicaea decided which gospels among the many in circulation were the real thing. Imperial edicts also forbade pagan practices. On the orders of Constantine's sons, women and children were force-fed, their mouths held open by a wooden engine, while consecrated bread was stuffed down their throats. When Constantine's nephew, Julian, came to power in 361, he reversed the tide of religious intolerance, having been brought up a pupil of the Neoplatonist philosopher Iamblichus. He well understood the mission of the being he called the seven-rayed god. He gave equal rights to all subjects regardless of their religious beliefs, and gave permission for pagan temples to reopen. Julian wrote famous polemic against the narrow dogmatic Christianity that had grown up during the time of Constantine, which is why later Christian writers came to call him the apostate, meaning someone who discarded the faith. He believed that Christianity had been seeking to deny the reality of the gods he had encountered through initiation. Julian led a military campaign into Persia just as the Greeks had besieged Troy to control the initiation knowledge hidden within. Julian wished to understand the secret knowledge of the Manichaean mystery school based in Persia. He knew enough to know that the mission of the sun god was under threat and that the inner mysteries of Manichaeism concerned the secrets of the war between the sun god and Ahriman, or Satan, the spirit of materialism. But before he could accomplish his mission, Julian was murdered by a follower of Constantine, and a new Saturnine era began when knowledge of true initiatic spirituality would finally be driven underground. The Emperor Theodosius began a ruthless policy of suppressing all disagreement with the imperial line on Christian doctrine. He confiscated the property of heretics, quote unquote, and took over their temples. Statues of Isis were rededicated to Mary. The Pantheon in Rome was a sublime and cosmic beauty, unlike any purpose-built church. This temple to all the gods was converted by Theodosius into a temple of monotheism. Theodosius closed down the mystery schools and in 391 besieged the Serapeum in Alexandria. This sacred compound with a vast cloud-capped temple to Serapis was one of the wonders of the ancient world. Inside, a statue of the god was suspended from the ceiling by a magnet. There were also libraries that housed the world's greatest collection of books. Fortunately, many books were smuggled out before the Serapeum was burned to the ground and its sacred statues dragged through the streets. Finally, Theodosius turned his attention to the Neoplatonic school of philosophy based in Alexandria, foremost preserver of the intellectual legacy of the mystery schools. The great personality of Neoplatonism at that time was a young woman called Hypatia. Daughter of a leading philosopher and mathematician, she was educated in philosophy, maths, geometry, and astronomy. Her father had also developed a series of exercises to make her body a fitting vessel for a brilliant mind. She loved swimming, horse riding, and mountain climbing. So she was beautiful as well as clever, and she soon won fame as an inventor of scientific instruments, including one to measure the specific gravity of liquids. Only a few fragments of her writing have survived, but she was known far and wide as one of the most brilliant minds of the time. She attracted large crowds as a lecturer. Well versed in the wisdom of Plotinus and Iamblichus, she explained in her lectures how Christianity had evolved out of the teachings of the mystery schools, and she argued, like her father, that no single tradition or doctrine could have exclusive claim to the truth. One afternoon in 414, when Hypatia was leaving a lecture hall, a gang of black-cowled monks forced her from her chariot, stripped her naked, and dragged her through the streets to a nearby church. There they pulled her through the cool, flitting shadows to the altar. In an atmosphere perfumed with incense, they swarmed all over her body, her naked form now covered by black cloth, and they tore her limb from limb. Later, they scraped the flesh from her bones using oyster shells and burned all her remains. Wow. The church was trying to erase Hypatia from history just as the priests of Amun had tried to erase Akhenaten. Okay, so we have another picture, and the caption is The Pantheon in Rome. Ovid explains that temples represent the whole cosmos in the form of a sphere. The great rotunda of the Pantheon is 143 feet in diameter with an aperture in the roof to admit the sun. The height from the floor to the top, where this hole is equal to the diameter so that it contains a vast sphere of air. The niches around the floor originally held images of the planetary gods. And here is a picture of the Pantheon. Oops, that's what I wanted to show you. There's a picture of the Pantheon. interesting. I've been there, and um, it's an interesting story on how it was built, but I won't get into that. Hey Vesper, how you doing tonight? Just saw that you came in. Sorry if you've been here a while and I didn't notice. Um, it's an interesting chapter, talking a lot about what nowadays we know as omnism, um, or kind of skirting around it and mentioning it a little bit here and there. Anyway, okay. It is too easy to see the church as the evil repressor of free thought and to romanticize outlawed groups and antinomian schools like the Neoplatonists and the Gnostics. From its early history, the church has numbered among its leaders practitioners of black magic and other initiates who have abused their supernatural powers for selfish ends. But it is equally true and perhaps more important to say that from the time of St. Paul and St. Augustine, the greatest church leaders have been initiates of the highest order who have sought to guide humanity according to the divine plan outlined in this book. They knew that it was necessary for an understanding of reincarnation to be suppressed in the West. According to the cosmic plan, the West was to be the cradle for the developing sense of the value of an individual human life. I'm good. How are you? I am doing pretty good. Um, quite enjoying this particular chapter, um, and had a pretty decent day. So, yeah, I'm good. Um, This has been a very good read so far. Not quite what I was expecting, but very good anyway. Okay. On the other hand, the Neoplatonists, though they had continued the work of Pythagoras and Plato, converting into concepts the direct experiences of the spirit worlds, seemed altogether unaware of the great revolution that had taken place there. In their writings, there is no trace of the gospel of universal love that Jesus Christ had introduced. Similarly, the Gnostic emphasis on direct personal experience of the spirit worlds, as distinct from passive acceptance of abstract dogma, was in line with the impulse introduced by Jesus Christ. But many of the Gnostics were also vehement world haters in a way that ran contrary to the mission of Jesus Christ to transform the material world. Many of the beliefs that the Gnostic sects took from their adventures in the spirit worlds were also quite fantastical. Not only did some Gnostics believe that Jesus Christ had not sunk so low as to inhabit a physical body, that he had lived on earth only as some kind of phantom, but they also practiced bizarre extremes of mortification and debauchery as a way of disrupting their own despised bodily senses and gaining access to the spirit worlds. Some encouraged snakes to crawl over their naked bodies. Some drank menstrual blood, saying, quote, "Here is the body of here is the blood of Christ." Others believed that their sex magic would lead to the birth of godlike creatures. Others castrated themselves and boasted, "I am deader than you are." Yeah, there were some pretty out there Gnostics, that's for sure. Um, Rome wanted to stamp out doctrinal differences. Christian conviction and moral purpose were useful for Constantine and Theodosius, unifying the empire and strengthening it from within at a time when barbarian hordes were threatening it from the east. A steadily expanding empire in China had caused a domino effect across Central Asia and into Europe. Under pressure from the Far East, Goths, Visigoths, and Vandals invaded parts of Europe, even reaching as far as Rome before retreating again. Then, in the second quarter of the 5th century, the nomadic Mongolian tribes were united under a great leader, Attila the Hun. He swept through the territories previously invaded by Goths and Vandals and built an empire which stretched from the plains of Central Asia to northern Gaul. He pushed into northern Italy and raided Constantinople. Attila, the scourge of God, quote unquote, was has become a byword for barbarity, but an eyewitness account of a visit to Attila's encampment by a Greek historian, Priscus, gives a very different picture. Priscus shows Attila living in a simple wooden house of polished boards, surrounded by a wooden enclosure. Woolen mats served as carpets, and Attila, literally Little Father, received his visitors wearing simple linen clothes unadorned by gems or gold. He drank moderately from a wooden bowl and ate from a wooden plate. He showed no emotion during the interview except when his youngest son arrived, whom he chucked under the chin and regarded with a look of satisfaction. It is also said that when Attila conquered the Christian city of Corinth, anyway, I don't know why I'm having trouble with that word. He was outraged to find a prostitute on every street corner. He gave them the choice of marrying one of his men or exile. If Attila was not the ravening monster of popular imagination, it is nevertheless true to say that if he had succeeded in overrunning the Roman Empire, this would have been disastrous for the evolution of human consciousness. The Romans feared Attila more than any of their other enemies. Attila would not allow his people to live in Roman territory or buy Roman goods. When he invaded Roman territories, he reversed Romanization, demolishing Roman buildings, and he also took thousands of pounds of gold from Rome in tribute money. When in 452 he finally had Rome itself in his grip, the emperor sent out Leo, the bishop of Rome, to meet him. The future Pope Leo negotiated a deal with Attila by the terms of which Honoria, the daughter of the emperor, would be his wife, together with a dowry of thousands more pounds of gold. At this point, Attila believed he had achieved his ambition to take over the Roman Empire and rule the world. Attila and his people practiced shamanism. In all battles, Attila was guided wisely, as it turned out, by his shaman priests. The great terror-striking uproar of the Hun army going to battle was made up of the howling of dogs, the clanking of weapons, the sounds of horns and bells. All this was intended to summon the battalions of the dead, the ghosts of their ancestors, to fight alongside them. They were also shamanistically calling on the group souls of carnivores, the wolves and the bears, to enter into them and give them supernatural powers. Because we have been considering the barbarian invasions from the east, this is perhaps a good place to pause to consider shamanism. The word shaman comes from the Tungus Mongol noun meaning one who knows. Shamans, from the time of the barbarian invasion to the present, have used a variety of techniques. Mircea Eliade has called them archaic techniques of ecstasy, to work themselves into a trance state, rhythmic drumming and dancing, hyperventilation, frenzied self-mutilation, sensory deprivation, dehydration, sleep deprivation, and also psychoactive plants, including ayahuasca, peyote cactus, the ergot fungus. Recent studies by William M. Bowden, professor of biology at California State University, and others, have also made it look like likely that drugs were used to induce trance states in mystery centers. For example, the kykeon at Eleusis and the blue water lily, taken in conjunction with opium and mandrake roots in ancient Egypt. And just as an aside, I have read Mircea Eliade. I had to in getting my anthropology degree. I do not like that guy's theories. It's like too black and white, way too black and white. Anyway, I got in trouble because I criticized him. Yeah, it's Mercia, but that's a guy. Um, yeah, I got in a lot of trouble with certain professors because I criticized him, and because he's such a great theorist and blah blah blah, and how dare you? Anyway, Anyway, completely irrelevant to the reading, but the name came up, and it always makes me mad. Scientists have isolated an enzyme in the brain that induces these trance states. Research seems to suggest that 2% of us have high enough levels of dimethyltryptamine naturally occurring in the brain to give us spontaneous and involuntary trance states. It also seems likely that we all have higher levels until adolescence, when a process of crystallization takes place, cladding the pineal gland and impeding its function. For the rest of us, these ancient techniques similar are necessary. Anthropologists have noticed that accounts of shamanistic experience across many different cultures show a progression through the same stages. First, a blacking out of the world of the senses and a sense of a journey through the darkness. Great pain is often experienced as if the body is being dismembered. Second, a sea of lights, often with a shifting net of geometric patterns, the matrix. Third, these patterns morph into shapes, most commonly snakes and half-human, half-animal creations, often with pliable, semi-transparent bodies. Lastly, when the trance fades, the shaman has a sense of enjoying supernatural powers, the ability to heal, information about enemies, mind-to-mind influence on animals, and the gift of prophecy. This may all seem to fit nicely with the accounts of initiations in mystery schools that we have looked at. Greg Jacobs at Harvard Medical School has said that, quote, by the use of shamanistic techniques, we can work ourselves into powerful ancestral states of consciousness, end quote. But in the view of modern esotericists, the example of shamanism will only take us so far when trying to understand the mystery schools and secret societies. Many of the paintings produced by shamanistic cultures as records of their trances are startlingly beautiful, but they do not give the same magnificent, comprehensive panorama of the spirit worlds found, for example, on the ceilings of the temples of Edfu or Philae. Moreover, the beings encountered by shamans seem to be from the lower levels rather than the most elevated planetary gods with whom the temple priests communed. In the view of modern esoteric teachers, then, all shamanism, whether that of the old Hunnic or Mongol hordes or that practiced by the Sangoma in South Africa today, represent a degeneration of a once magnificent primordial vision. Again, we see that in the secret history, everything is upside down and wrong way round. In conventional history, religion's early stages were marked by animism and totemism, then developed into the complicated cosmologies of the great ancient civilizations. In the secret history, humankind's primordial vision was complicated, sophisticated, and magnificent, and only later degenerated into animism, totemism, and shamanism. Attila's tribespeople practiced a shamanism that gave them an access to the spirit worlds that many a churchman might envy, but it was access to an atavistic state. It ran contrary to the impulse of the evolution of human consciousness that had been developed by Pythagoras and Plato, and had now been given new direction by Jesus Christ and Paul. The aim of this evolution was a beautiful one, that people would be able to take joy in their individual intellectual strength and superiority, and that they should be able to choose to move freely, powerfully, and lovingly, not only through the material world, but also through the spirit worlds. Drug taking is, of course, a big part of modern shamanistic practice, but it is forbidden by most modern esoteric teachers as a means of reaching the spirit worlds. The aim of these teachers is to achieve experience of the spirit worlds with intelligence and critical faculties as unimpaired as possible, indeed heightened. To enter the spirit worlds on drugs, on the other hand, is to do so without proper preparation and may open up a portal into a demonic dimension which then refuses to close. I'm not sure I totally agree with that. I mean, a real shaman, not just somebody who goes somewhere and pays somebody to give them some ayahuasca, but a real shaman has prepared since they were a child to experience those things. And I'm not a big advocate of ayahuasca and all the drugs that some of them take, but I understand why they do it, and if they do it properly, I would have to disagree with him. But your tourist who wants to experience ayahuasca, okay, yeah, I totally get where he's coming from. When in 453 Attila prepared to celebrate marriage to a high-born, soft-skinned young woman, he already had hundreds of wives. He was a man in the prime of life and full of potency, about to oversee the end of the Roman Empire. The delicate early growth of a new stage of human consciousness was about to be nipped in the bud. In the morning, Attila was found dead. He had suffered a massive nosebleed. Okay, that's strange. Um, quote, I believe because it is absurd, end quote. This famous phrase by the first of the Latin-speaking church fathers, Tertullian, influenced many thinkers in the late 19th and first half of the 20th century. We may imagine how absurd life might have seemed to a citizen of the Roman Empire in the days of its decline. He lived in a disenchanted world where the great spiritual certainties on which the civilizations of the ancient world had been founded seemed doubtful. They no longer corresponded to his experience. Pan was long dead, and the oracles had fallen silent. God and the gods seemed little more than empty, abstract ideas, while the real vigorous thought life was in the realm of science and technology, in the atomic theories of Lucretius, in amazing engineering projects, aqueducts, drainage systems, and roads thousands of miles long that were springing up all around. Spiritual certainties had been replaced by harsh political and economic realities. Yet if this citizen had been minded to listen to the inner promptings of his spirit, he might have noticed that this harsh and mechanical grinding of the wheels of necessity, this new way of the world, threw into relief something very like its opposite, something elsewhere called the nameless way. If this citizen had chosen not to shut it out, he might have caught suggestions emanating from underground streams of thought. At this critical juncture, we move from the age of the mystery schools to the age of the secret societies, from the directing of the course of history by the political elite to something much more subversive coming from below. A new mood was taking over the soul life of initiates, which may be traced in the life of God's Joker, Francis of Assisi, in Shakespeare's Fools, in the gentle undermining work of Rabelais in Gulliver's Travels, Alice in Wonderland, and in the cuttings and castings of Kurt Schwitters. In answer to a question about the meaning of Zen, a monk raised a finger. A boy in the class began to ape him, and then afterwards, whenever anyone discussed this monk's teachings, this naughty boy would raise his finger in mockery. But the next time the boy attended class, the monk grabbed him and cut off his finger. As he ran off crying, the monk called after him. The boy turned around to look at the monk, and the monk looked back at him and raised his own finger. At that moment, the boy was enlightened. This conte cruel is not a historical episode, but one of the classic fables of Zen formulated at the time of Attila's nosebleed. The capacity for abstract thought had been developing for less than 1,000 years, inspired by Pythagoras, Confucius, and Socrates. Buddhism had spread from India to China with the visit of the 28th Buddhist patriarch Bodhidharma. Then in China, over the next 200 years, Buddhism and Taoism fused to create a philosophy of spontaneous initiative enlightenment called Chan, or Zen, as it would later come to be called in Japan. Chan It's TCH apostrophe AN, the way it's written. Brought a new cautionary sense of the limitations of abstract thought. The boy and his fellow pupils had been struggling to understand what the monk was saying. We may imagine them frowning with the effort to grasp enlightenment cerebrally, but the boy is suddenly enabled to see the world from the point of view of an altered state of consciousness. He is suddenly seeing the world from the point of view of the vegetable consciousness that is centered in the solar plexus rather than the skull. It is by means of this vegetable consciousness that we are connected individually to every other living thing in the cosmos. These connections can be visualized as tendrils of a great cosmic tree, and every solar plexus as a flower on the tree. In another way of looking at it, this vegetable consciousness is another dimension, the world between the worlds and the gateway to the spirit worlds. It is consciousness, the light beyond the light of the intellect, to quote St. Augustine, that anyone must slip into who wishes to become enlightened. The boy is enlightened because, from the point of view of this other form of consciousness, the monk's finger belongs to him as much as it does the monk. The normal categories of human head thought are inadequate to cover this. Laughter erupts when you suddenly see the cosmos upside down, inside out, and the other way around. At the beginning of the second half of the 5th century, a new sense of absurdity entered the world, and from then on, the great initiates of the secret societies in the West as well as in the East would always have a touch of Zen. Under a strong ruler, Justinian, the Byzantine Empire expanded, even regaining territories from the barbarians. Justinian closed down the remaining schools of Greek philosophy, causing teachers to flee, taking with them texts like the writings of Aristotle, including his now lost alchemical treatise. Many arrived in Persia, where King Khusra dreamed of founding a great academy like the one that had inspired Greek civilization. In an intellectual ferment that took in elements of Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, and Hermeticism, the methodology of Aristotle was applied jointly to the material world and the spirit worlds. So began the golden age of Arabian magic. In our childhood, all our childhoods are lit up by a vision of magic, of genies, magic lamps, and abracadabra. These stories began to weave their magical influence on the history of the world in the 6th century. There were rumors of automata and flying machines and caches of self-generating gold, of powerful magic spells that would become collected in forbidden books. Soon the whole world would be under the spell of Arabia, as books of its spells were published far and wide, books containing the whispers of demons. And that is the end of that chapter. How long have we been going here? Wow, that took me an hour, and the next chapter is a little bit longer than that one. So a lot of these chapters are heavy in pictures. The ones that are not take a lot longer to read. It's pretty dense stuff. This one's got a few more pictures than the last, so it'll go a little quicker. But before I jump into it, I'm going to quickly go and refill my water glass, and I will be right back. Prepare to die. Okay. Like I said, I just wanted to go refill my water glass. So, chapter 17, the title is The Age of Islam, Muhammad and Gabriel, The Old Man of the Mountains, Harun al-Rashid and the Arabian Nights, Charlemagne and the Historic Parsifal, Chartres Cathedral. Okay. A grim, forbidding figure looked down from the spirit worlds on these developments. In 570, a child called Muhammad was born in Mecca. When he was 6, he lost both his parents and was hired out as a shepherd's boy. He grew broad-shouldered, with curly black hair and a beard through which shone dazzling white teeth. He became a camel driver, transporting the spices and perfumes that were the specialty of Mecca to Syria. Then at the age of 25 he married a wealthy widow of Mecca and became one of the richest and most respected citizens of that city. Although he had in one way now won back all he had lost at the death of his parents, Mohammed was dissatisfied. The religious center of Mecca was a large black granite stone called the Kaaba, which in some traditions is said to have fallen to earth from the Sirius star system. At that time, Arabia was populated by shamanistic tribes, each worshipping their own gods and spirits, and at the center of this whirlwind, next to the Kaaba, stood a sacred tent which housed hundreds of their idols. Mecca had also become corrupted by the sale of holy water, taken from a spring which Ishmael had caused to spring from the sand. So to Muhammad's eyes, all of this looked lax. He saw a people interested only in money-making, gambling, horsemanship, and getting drunk. While driving camel trains down to places like Syria and Egypt, he heard about Judaism and also stories about Jesus Christ. Did the story of the cleansing of the temple strike a chord? Muhammad became convinced that Arabia needed a prophet, someone like Jesus Christ, who could purge the people of superstitions and of corruption and could unite them in one cosmic purpose. Muhammad was sitting in the hills surrounding Mecca, brooding darkly on how all this might be achieved, when an angel appeared before him, saying, "I am the angel Gabriel." The apparition then showed Muhammad a golden tablet and told him to read it. Muhammad protested that he was illiterate, but when Gabriel commanded him a second time, Muhammad found that he could indeed read. So began the series of angelic conversations that became the Quran. Later, Muhammad went into town and preached what Gabriel had taught him with blazing sincerity and irresistible power. He would summarize his creed in these down-to-earth terms. Quote, My teaching My teachings are simple. Allah is the one God. Muhammad is his prophet. Give up idolatry. Do not steal. Do not lie. Do not slander. And never become intoxicated. If you follow my teachings, then you follow Islam. End quote. When challenged to perform a miracle to prove that his preaching was divinely inspired, he refused. He said that Allah had raised the heavens without recourse to pillars, had made the earth, the rivers, the fig, the date, and the olive, and that these things were miraculous enough. We may hear in this ecstatic materialism the first whisperings of the modern age. During their angelic conversations, the archangel Gabriel asked Muhammad to choose refreshment. Muhammad chose milk, which occultists call moon juice. Alcohol would be forbidden in Islam. It is highly significant from an esoteric point of view that the angel who dictated the Quran to Muhammad was Gabriel, traditionally archangel of the moon. Allah is the Muslim name for Jehovah, great God of the moon and thought. Gabriel is here heralding the power of thought to control human passions and quell fantasy, and his God is the great God of thou shalt not, represented in Muslim iconography by the crescent moon. Thought is a death process that feeds on life-giving energies. In the Middle Ages, the great age of Islam, the sexual impulse would have to be suppressed in order for the human capacity for thought to grow, and in order to quell the outgrowths of Gnostic fantasy, religious leaders imposed their authority on the people. That is apparently a teaching that they don't stick to anymore, because they generally have pretty good-sized families, really strict Muslims. For the point of view of conventional Western history, at least to my knowledge anyway, from the point of view of conventional Western history, Europe was besieged by the uncivilized Muslims during the latter part of the Dark Ages and on into the Middle Ages. From the point of view of esoteric history, the truth is something pretty nearly the mirror image of this. The impulses seeded at this time that would grow and transform Europe, indeed the whole human race, came from Islam. And we have a picture. I'm going to read that, and then I'm going to show you the picture, and I have to pause for just a second because I'm getting a low battery message from my mouse. So I'll have to change that out real quick while you're looking at the picture. So, the Caves of the Desert Fathers in an early 19th century print. The Desert Fathers, living in isolation, devoted their lives to practicing extreme techniques that would gain them access to the spirit worlds, a way of life that would develop into the monastic movement. Saint Antony the Great, the greatest of the Desert Fathers, would stay for long periods in tombs in a trance-like state. On one occasion, Antony advised a man to cover himself with meat. When this man was shredded by wild dogs, he learned something of what it would be like to be attacked by demons on the other side of the grave. In the episode known as the Temptation of St. Anthony, he himself entered the sphere of the moon, otherwise known as Kamaloka, or Purgatory, and was granted a vision of the devil, a tall black man with his head in the clouds. He also saw angels who were able to guide some human spirits up beyond the devil's reach. Okay, so I will show you that picture, and I'll change batteries here real quick and while you're looking at it. Okay, there we go. Wasn't wanting to make good contact. All right. Getting back to the reading. Muhammad's preaching in the marketplace at Mecca prompted a plot to assassinate him. He escaped to the town of Medina with his disciple Abu Bakr in order to marshal his supporters. In 629 he returned to Mecca, and in the 4 years until his death he established control over the rest of Arabia. When Abu Bakr became his successor, or caliph, the will to conquer continued at an astonishing rate. Oh, and we are in an ad. Damn it, Jim. Damn it, Jim, all to hell. I hate it when I miss that. So it says that we're almost done with the break. All right. So it says we're back. I don't know what you may have missed or didn't. I didn't notice we were in an ad. So I'm gonna just assume that you missed my reading after the picture and we'll move on. So I will just reread that. It was only two sentences anyway. Muhammad's preaching in the marketplace at Mecca prompted a plot to assassinate him. He escaped to the town of Medina with his disciple Abu Bakr in order to marshal his supporters. In 629 he returned to Mecca, and in the 4 years until his death he established control over the rest of Arabia. When Abu Bakr became his successor, or caliph, the will to conquer continued at an astonishing rate. One of the things that makes a religion successful is if it works in the world, that is to say, if it brings material benefits. The combination of Muhammad's radical monotheism with the scientific methodology of Aristotle that had earlier pervaded Arabian thought would quickly encircle the globe from Spain to the boundaries of China. Absorbing new ideas as well as spreading them, the Arabs took in Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Chinese science, including the manufacture of paper. They made great advances in astronomy, medicine, physics, and mathematics, replacing the clumsy Roman numerals with the system we use today. By its own account, Sufism had ancient, even primordial roots. Some traditions date its origins to the Saramung Brotherhood, or Brotherhood of the Bee, founded in the Caucasus in Central Asia during the first great post-Atlantean migration. Later, Sufism was undoubtedly influenced by Gnosticism and Neoplatonism. If there was a tendency in Islam in its triumphant period to become dogmatic and paternalistic, Sufism represented a contrary impulse, a fascination with the sometimes perverse and paradoxical twisting this way and that of the spirit. Esoteric Islam advocated immersing oneself in the gentler, more feminine and feeling side of the spiritual life, which would find expression in the great outpouring of Sufi poetry. The question of what constitutes oneself, quote unquote, is also a big issue in Sufism. What we generally imagine to be our own self, it teaches, is really an entity that operates independently of us, made up for the most part of fears, false attachments, dislikes, prejudices, envy, pride, habits, preoccupations, and compulsions. A lot of Sufi practice involves breaking down this false sense, this false will. Quote, God is nearer to a man than his jugular vein, end quote. According to the verse from the Quran, I don't know what their chapters, they have a certain name that I don't know, so I'll just use the normal chapter verse terminology. So chapter 50, verse 16. Yet, for the most part, distracted by our false selves, we are not awake to this. The great Sufi writer Ibn Arabi said that a Sufi master is someone who unveils one to oneself. Practices under instruction from a Sufi master might involve breathing exercises and music used to attain an altered state. Sufism taught the sometimes painful process of waking up, quote unquote, of becoming aware of ourselves and of the cosmic mystical current that runs through us and becoming more fully alive. Because they opened themselves totally to this mystic current, Sufis could be wild, unpredictable, and disconcerting. We will see later that Sufism has had a vast, though largely unacknowledged, influence on Western culture. Muhammad's brother-in-law, Ali, was to him as John to Jesus Christ, receiving and transmitting the secret teachings. Sufis obeyed Islamic law but believed it to be the outer shell of esoteric teaching. Ali and Muhammad's daughter, Fatima, established what became known as the Fatimid Empire, ruling a large part of North Africa and Cairo, where they established a school for esoteric philosophy called the House of Wisdom. There were 7 initiatory grades taught within. Candidates would be initiated into timeless wisdom and gain secret powers. Sir John Woodruff, the 19th century translator of the key tantric texts, also uncovered a Sufi tradition with a parallel understanding of occult physiology. In this Sufi tradition, centers of power had beautiful and intriguing names such as Cedar Heart and Lily Heart. One of the initiates to emerge from the House of Wisdom was Hassan-i Sabah, the famous old man of the mountains. He founded a small sect which in 1090 captured the castle of Alamut in the mountains south of the Caspian Sea in modern-day Iran. From his mountain fastness, he sent his secret agents all over the world to do his bidding, exerting a puppet master's control on distant rulers. His Hashishim assassins infiltrated courts and armies. Anyone who even thought of disobeying Hassan was found dead the next morning. The Western view of Hassan is no doubt distorted by a passage in Marco Polo's account of his travels. He claimed that the old man of the mountains gave his young followers drugs which put them to sleep for 3 days. When they woke up, they found themselves in a beautiful garden they were told was paradise. They were surrounded by beautiful girls who played them music and gave them anything they wanted. After 3 days, the young men were sent back to sleep. When they awoke, they were brought again before Hassan, convinced that the old man had the power to send them back to paradise on a whim. So when Hassan wanted someone killed, his assassins would do it willingly, knowing that paradise would be their certain reward. In reality, Hassan banned all intoxicants, even executing one of his own sons for being drunk. He banned music, too. Among his own people, he was renowned as a holy man and alchemist, an adept who was able to control events all over the world by supernatural means. This was despite the fact that once he arrived and set up his court there, he only ever left his room at Alamut twice. Alamut. In the 20th century, the archetype of the man who appears mad but really controls the whole world from his cell appeared as Dr. Mabuse in the deeply esoteric films of Fritz Lang. Harun al-Rashid was another of the extraordinary, compelling characters of this era. He became caliph in his early 20s and quickly made Baghdad the most splendid city in the world, building a palace of unparalleled splendor served by hundreds of courtiers and slaves and a harem. It was a place of glittering materiality where a man might experience every pleasure the world has to offer, grow bored with them all, and long for novelty. The turbaned Oriental potentate of all our imaginations and caliph of the Tales of the Arabian Nights, he drew to his court all the great writers, artists, thinkers, and scientists of his day. It was rumored that, as related in the Arabian Nights, he would sometimes slip out of a secret door in the palace in disguise in order to eavesdrop on his people and find out what they really thought. It's very interesting to me that they were such a driving force in technology and knowledge. And what happened? What happened to the whole Arabic part of the world? It's like they went so far and then they got just stuck. Just my opinion. Anyway, in one of the most famous tales, a fisherman on the Red Sea catches a large iron pot in his nets. When he has hauled it on board, he sees that the metal cover is engraved with the interlocked triangles of Solomon's seal. Naturally curious, The fisherman opens the pot, and at once a black vapor rises out of it and spreads itself all over the sky, so that all he can see is darkness. Then the vapor condenses again into the monstrous form of a jinn, who tells the fisherman he was imprisoned in the pot by Solomon. He says that after 200 years he swore he would make rich anyone who set him free. After 500 years he swore he would reward his liberator with power. But after 1,000 years of captivity he swore he would kill whoever set him free. So the jinn tells the fisherman to prepare to die, but the fisherman says he can't believe the jinn was really inside the pot, and so the spirit, to prove it, turns himself back into vapor and sinks with a slow spiraling motion back inside, at which point, of course, the fisherman claps the lid back on. This might seem like a silly story for children, but for occultists it is packed with esoteric lore. But the word jinn means to hide, and the detailed theory and practice of dealing with these entities, said to live in ruined houses, in wells, and under bridges, was actively cultivated among Arab peoples. Moreover, the imprisoning of spirits and demons in amulets, rings, and stones, using magic sigils such as the Seal of Solomon, was well known. By the Middle Ages, such lore, largely Arabic in origin and concerned practically, uh, particularly, with the empowering of talismans by astrological means, would be collected in many famous grimoires. The greatest of these, called the Picatrix, would fascinate many of the more influential personalities in this history, including Trithemius, Ficino, Ficino, I'm not familiar with that one, and Elias Ashmole. Familiar with both the first and third, but not that middle one. Rumi grew up to become the great poet at court. He was a disconcerting presence even as a small child. At the age of 6 he began the habit of fasting and began, too, to see visions. There is a story that one day he was playing with a group of children who were chasing a cat from rooftop to rooftop. Rumi protested that humans should be more ambitious than animals, and then vanished. When the others cried out in fright, he suddenly reappeared behind them. He had a strange look in his eyes and said spirits in green cloaks had carried him away to other worlds. The green cloaks may have been shadows of El Kidir, the Green One, a powerful being able to materialize and dematerialize at will. The Green One is said by the Sufis to come to the aid of those on a special mission. At 37 years old, now a young university professor, Rumi was adored by his students. One day he was riding his horse, followed by his students, when he was accosted by a dervish. Shamsi Tabriz had made a name for himself insulting sheikhs and holy men because he would be guided by nothing but God, which made him unpredictable and sometimes an overwhelming, even shattering presence. The two men embraced and went to live in a cell together, where they meditated for 3 months. Each saw what he had been searching for in the eyes of the other. But Rumi's students grew so jealous that one day they ambushed Shamsi and stabbed him to death. Great students. Devastated, Rumi wept and wailed and grew thin. He was desolate. Then one day he was walking down the street past a goldsmith's shop where he heard the rhythmic beat of a hammer upon gold. Rumi began repeating the name of Allah and then suddenly began to whirl in ecstasy. This is how the Malevi, or whirling dervish, an order of Sufis, was born. The magnificent civilization of the Arabs both fascinated and horrified medieval Europe. Travelers returned with tales of life at court, of hundreds of lions on leashes, of a lake of mercury on which lay a leather bed, inflated with air and fastened by silk bands to 4 silver columns at the corners. The most common report was of a miraculous mechanical garden made out of precious metals, and containing mechanical birds that flew and sang. In the middle of it stood a great golden tree bearing fruit made out of astonishingly large precious stones and representing the planets. To many, these prodigies seemed necromantic. They existed on the border between magic and science. A partial explanation, at least, may lie in the discovery made in Baghdad in 1936. A German archaeologist called William Koenig was excavating palace drains when he discovered that he identified immediately what he identified immediately as a primitive electric battery. It dated back at least as far as the early Middle Ages. When a colleague created a replica, she found she was able to generate an electric current with it that coated a silver figurine with gold in under half an hour. The Baghdad batteries. In 802, Harun al-Rashid sent the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne a gift of silks, brass candelabras, perfume, and ivory chessmen. He sent, too, an elephant and a water clock that marked the hours by dropping bronze balls into a bowl and little mechanical knights that emerged from little doors. It was a gift intended to impress upon Charlemagne the superiority of Arabian science and the reach of its empire. If it hadn't been for 3 generations of Frankish kings, Charles Martel, Pepin, and Charlemagne, Islam might have wiped Christianity off the face of the earth. Born in 742, Charlemagne inherited the spear of Longinus, used to pierce the side of Jesus Christ on the cross. Charlemagne lived and slept with the spear, believing it gave him powers to foresee the future and forge his own destiny. In the first decade of the 9th century, he won victories against the Muslims. He wielded his sacred sword, Joyeuse, to keep them from invading northern Spain and to protect, too, the route of the pilgrimage to St. James of Compostela. Okay. Whew, excuse me. I'm going to sit up again here. We've got 2 pictures. Um, the first caption, the call to prayer, a great impulse of upside down, other way round thinking entered the world through Sufism. The truth is also seeking the seeker, quote unquote. Okay, so let me show you that one first, then we'll come back. I'll read the caption on the second one. So, the call to prayer. We've all seen something like this and even heard it in movies, I'm sure. Okay, and the next one, P.L. Travers, creator of Mary Poppins, was a disciple of the 20th century master G.I. Gurdjieff, who was influenced both by the Sufis and Tibetan lamas. The character of Poppins in the books, rather than in the more sentimental film, is that of a Sufi adept, disconcerting in the way she is able to turn the world inside out and upside down and bend the laws of nature. And we have what I would assume is one of the original illustrations from the book with the story. Excuse me. Um, Charlemagne had an imposing physical presence, some 7 feet tall, with blazing blue eyes. He was a man of simple, moderate habits, yet he managed to impose his will on the course of history. Not only did his vision of fortress Europe maintain a Christian sense of identity in the face of Islamic invasion, but he also moved to protect his people against corrupt and tyrannical nobles. It is from the writings of one of the great magi of the Renaissance, Trithemius, abbot of Sponheim, that we learn the strange story of the Holy Vem, a secret tribunal of free judges, founded by Charlemagne in 770, with secret ciphers and signs to exclude the uninitiated. Sometimes known as the secret soldiers of light, masked men would nail a summons to the gates of a castle whose owner thought he could live above the law. Some nobles disobeyed the summons. They would try to protect themselves with bodyguards, but inevitably they would be found stabbed to death with the characteristic cruciform dagger of the holy Vem. A noble who chose to obey the summons would arrive late at night alone at the designated place, sometimes a lonely crossroads. Masked men would appear and place a hood on his head before leading him off to be interrogated. At midnight the hood would be removed, and the nobleman would find himself perhaps in a vast underground vault, facing the free judges, masked and dressed in black. Sentence would be passed. This secret society is not obviously esoteric or arcane in its philosophy, but the vault motif points to legends of Charlemagne's underground initiation. I know I'm going to butcher this word. Oh, someone stole Durandal, the sword of the paladin Roland. I don't know what you're referring to in the reading. Maybe I missed something. It is difficult to keep track of it all when I'm reading it out loud. But um, anyway, I know I'm going to butcher this word, but the Enchiridion of Pope Leo was a book of spells, including protection against poison, fire, storm, and wild beasts, which emerged into exoteric history in the early 16th century, but was said to have been worn at all times by Charlemagne, who carried it tied to his person in a little leather bag. One note of authenticity in this story is that the first chapter of St. John's Gospel was included in the Enchiridion as its most powerful spell. These verses are still used in this way by practicing esotericists. More solid evidence of Charlemagne's initiatic way of thinking can be seen today in the Aachen Chapel, that's Aachen. Added to Charlemagne's palace, it was the largest building in the world north of the Alps. Its octagonal shape looks forward to the walls that will surround the New Jerusalem, according to the esoteric numerology of the Revelation of St. John. Entry is by the Wolf Door, named after the legendary wolf who tricked the devil out of possession of the chapel. The visitor looks up to the first floor gallery to see the imposing throne of the Holy Roman Empire, made from simple slabs of white marble. In the center of the chapel, a solid gold casket contains Charlemagne's bones. Above it, quote, the crowns of light, end quote, a gigantic wheel-shaped chandelier hangs like a crown chakra ablaze. Charlemagne's achievements include his bringing together of the great scholars of Christendom in an attempt to rival the court of Harun al-Rashid. The greatest scholar was perhaps Alcuin of York. I'm not sure how to pronounce that either. Alcuin. Alcuin, maybe. Um, This British connection is significant in the secret history. The spirit of King Arthur lives and breathes in the history of Charlemagne. He is a defender of the faith who keeps pagans at bay with the help of a weapon that confers invincibility and of a circle of faithful knights or paladins, as they are known in the case of Charlemagne. Oh, that's where you were. Okay. Now I'm starting to catch on. I'm just a bit slow. Um, We have seen that the original King Arthur lived in the Iron Age, a champion of the sun god at a time of encroaching darkness. The stories of the Grail, which were added to the canon at the time of Charlemagne, are based on historical events. You might assume that the story of Parsifal is an allegory, but in the secret history He was a man of flesh and blood, a reincarnation of Mani, the 3rd century founder of Manichaeism. Though he did not know it, he was the nephew of one of Charlemagne's paladins, William of Orange, who fought in a battle against the Saracens at Carcassonne in 783. This battle cost the Muslims so dearly that they withdrew from France to Spain. Raised to be a forester, Parsifal lived with his mother deep in the woods, far away from the glamour of court life and the dangers of chivalry. He did not know his father or his uncle. He was never to be a knight like Roland, famous in his own day, a knight whose deeds were blazed across the sky and celebrated in the official records, but his local deeds, his private battles, would change the course of history. One day Parsifal was playing by himself in the woods when a troop of knights rode by. The episode is described in a passage by Chrétien de Troyes. I know I mispronounced that. Troyes, that lights up with imagination. Okay, now I get what that was. But we're in an ad now, it looks like. Hmm. Well, I'll wait till it ends. And then I'll start the quote over. Otherwise, I don't know where we were. And it looks like we should be done. Uh, and there. Okay, now it's showing me back. It hasn't said we're back, but apparently we were cutting in and out there for a minute. Sorry about that. I'm going to start this quote over because I'm not sure where we left off. So, quote, trees were bursting into leaf, the Irish blooming, and birds singing when the son of the widow went out into the wild and lonely forest. He was practicing hurling spears when he heard a clashing, jangling, thumping sound. Then suddenly he saw 5 knights ride out from among the trees in full armor, their helmets shining in the sun. The gold, silver, white, and blue of their liveries danced before his eyes. He had never seen anything like this before and thought he was being granted a vision of angels. End quote. Parsifal's own imagination was fired. He left his mother heartbroken and set off in search of adventure. For all his ideals, Parsifal was a foolish knight, and his missions were often fraught with misunderstanding and accident. His was a journey of loneliness and failure. What a thing to be known for, huh? Then one day, as dusk approached, he was riding by a river and asked 2 fishermen if they knew where he could find shelter. They directed him to a great castle set high on a hill. This turned out to be the castle of the fisher king Amfortas, who had been wounded and was bleeding from his thighs. It seemed that an evil king, Klingsor, had laid a trap for Amfortas involving some kind of sexual temptation and had succeeded in inflicting this wound on him. While Parsifal was sitting at dinner, a wonderful procession appeared, page boys carrying a bleeding spear and a shining bowl. After dinner, Parsifal fell into a deep sleep. In some versions of the legend, he also faced a series of trials. He was menaced by wild beasts, lions, and was tempted by a beautiful demon. He also had to cross the Bridge Perilous, a giant sword that spanned the moat. As we shall see, these variations can be reconciled. When he awoke, he found that the castle was deserted. He rode out to find that the crops had failed and the country became a wasteland. Parsifal was later accepted at court and received his spurs, but one day an ugly crone, the loathly lady, Loathly. So the word loathe with ly tacked on the end. That's a tough one for me to say. The loathly lady accosted him. She examined that the country was suffering because, when presented with a vision of the Grail, he had failed to ask the question which would have healed the Fisher King and restored his kingdom's fortunes. On his second visit to the Grail Castle, Parsifal asked Amfortas what ailed him, and he succeeded in the quest for the Grail where all other knights had been denied. Sir Launcelot had failed, for instance, because of his love for Guinevere, he did not have a pure heart. At the climax of his quest, Parsifal sees first the spear of Longinus, a reminder of the connection with Charlemagne, and then finally the Grail itself. What are we to make of this as history? The visionary element should certainly be understood as an account of an initiation ceremony. Parsifal's trials and visions took place in a deep trance. But of course, the fact that events are symbolic or allegorical does not mean that they are not to be that they are does not mean that they are not to be understood as literally true too. What then is the Grail? And then we have a picture here, which I will show you. First, the caption is, in chivalry, the helmet, the sword, and the spurs are symbols of initiation. The ceremony of creating a knight by the tapping of the shoulder with a sword is a memory of the ancient initiation ceremony of tapping the forehead with the thyrsus rod that makes springs of water and of wine flow. In some modern initiation ceremonies, this is remembered in the form of quite a fierce blow to the forehead. The blow allows the birth of a higher form of thought, as Athena, goddess of wisdom, was born from the forehead of her father. Okay, let me show you this picture. I'll have to blow it up here a little bit. So it almost looks like a knighting, except that the guy's not kneeling. He's being knighted in the standing position. Maybe? Or who knows? The person down here below seems to be affixing the spurs. So, yeah. Anyway. We have another picture immediately. And then we're getting pretty close to the end. We got about 3 pages of text after that because there's another picture. So this one, esoteric heraldic devices featuring many of the creatures and symbols of the secret history from A Grammar of British Heraldry 1854. So I'll bring that one up, and you've seen a lot of these if you've seen um, shields and standards of various knights and so on. So all of these mythical or so-called mythical creatures, depending on your point of view. I see Pegasus and mermaids and mermen and phoenix, unicorn, dragon. I forget what this one's called. It looks like a lion with horns. I can't remember what it's called. This is a harpy. Centaur, of course. I think this is a cockatrice. This one of these is this is a hippogriff, I think. So anyway, I don't recognize all of them, but yeah. Oh, and this is Sphinx. That's a Sphinx. Um, the lion's body, woman's head with wings. Sphinx. Okay, moving on. We're almost done here. We saw that in the early German version of the story of the Grail, the Grail is a stone. In this version, the Grail also seems to have the properties of the philosopher's stone of the alchemists. It shines, it regenerates, makes flesh and bones young again, and in the words of von Eschenbach, quote, offers so much of the world's sweetness and delight that it seems like the kingdom of heaven, end quote. Of course, if this stone that fell out of the forehead of Lucifer had been shaped into a bowl, it would also be a stone that had been worked on. In order to understand what the Grail really is, we should recall that its function is listen carefully to what the well-known story is telling us. Okay, that didn't make a whole... Let me read that again. That didn't make a whole lot of sense. In order to understand what the Grail really is, we should recall that its function is listen carefully to what the well-known story is telling us. So the Grail's function is to tell us to listen. Okay. It is a chalice or receptacle to hold bodily fluids. More particularly, it was to hold the blood of Christ, used to catch it as it spurted from his body on the cross, and then later symbolically at the Last Supper. As we have seen, blood is the distinguishing feature of animal consciousness, and in occult physiology, the animal part of our nature nestles in or is carried by, as if by a chalice, the vegetable part of our nature. The secret of the Holy Grail, then, is not that it represents a bloodline. This, I have already suggested, would go against the esoteric doctrine of reincarnation. Rather, it alludes to the role of the vegetable part of our nature as a living receptacle for our spirit or consciousness. The quest for the Grail is the quest for a purified receptacle fit to carry a higher form of spirit, and the trials in the course of the quest involve certain esoteric techniques of purification of the vegetable body. Rudolf Steiner, perhaps the greatest teacher of the 20th century, said that all serious esoteric work begins with work on the etheric, that is to say, the vegetable body. Because of the fall with a capital F, our animal selves have become so corrupted, and we are enthralled to our sexual selves. In fact, our animal selves are so corrupt that this has seeped down into our vegetable and material bodies, and it is beyond our power to purify them. We need supernatural help, and esoteric techniques are intended to enlist this help. If the plant-like dimension of humanity is purified, we will naturally become more plant-like. Saintly individuals can sometimes live on almost nothing but sunlight, after the manner of plants. The 20th century German mystic and miracle worker Teresa Neumann lived for some 40 years on nothing more than the daily consumption of a consecrated wafer. But if techniques to transform our vegetable bodies have existed since ancient times, what was new and distinctive about the techniques involved in the Grail initiation? In his deeply meaningful second encounter with the wounded Fisher King, Parsifal asks the question, "What ails thee, brother?" This shows a combination of selfless compassion and, most significantly, shows a free, inquiring spirit which was new in the 8th century. Here, then, is the beginning of a new impulse towards freedom of thought that marked the beginning of the end of the age of church authority. When Parsifal achieves a vision of the Holy Grail, this is a vision of the vegetable body or soul which has been so transformed by moral feeling and intellectual questioning that it is fit to carry a higher form of spirit, the spirit of Jesus Christ. The historical dimension of the story is contained in the way that Amfortas's wound causes the country to become a wasteland. The private devotions of initiates affect the destinies of nations. The form of the story is significant too. The story of Parsifal's attainment of the Grail is presented in terms of Parsifal's inner imaginative vision. In the temples and mystery schools of earlier ages, wonderful statues were fashioned, and gods were called down to inhabit them. In the Middle Ages, the great initiates would inspire wonderful imaginative pictures, and it was into these mental images that the gods would descend and breathe life. On the death of Charlemagne in 814, his empire quickly fell apart, but what has survived to this day is the living idea of a united Europe. Like King Arthur, Charlemagne has never really died, but waits to return in time of need. Getting there. The church grew in power and wealth. It wanted to be the sole keeper of keys to the kingdom. The church had earlier emphasized that an individual has but one life by suppressing teachings on reincarnation, and had emphasized one God by suppressing knowledge of its astronomical roots. Now it emphasized the unity of the disembodied parts of the human being. In 869, at the Eighth Ecumenical Council, the Church effectively closed the door to the spirit worlds by abolishing the ancient distinction between the vegetable dimension of the soul and the animal dimension of the spirit. Soul and spirit were declared to be the same thing, and the result of this was that the spirit worlds formerly encountered in the Mass would come to seem an empty abstraction. Experience of the spirit worlds was replaced by dogma to be accepted on authority. Meanwhile, a vital Islamic influence, part intellectual, part spiritual, continued to flow into Europe through centers of scholarship like Toledo and Sicily. The study of mathematics, geometry, and natural science, inspired in part by the Arabs' translation and preservation of the works of Aristotle, as well as astronomy and astrology, spread northwards, leading to the formation of the first universities in Europe. Based on the Islamic model, it led to the arabesques of Gothic architecture, influenced by the intricate vegetal, that may be a typo, but it reads vegetal, forms of mosque architecture. Or maybe it's just a term, I don't know. In the north porch of the cathedral at Chartres, founded in 1028, stands Melchizedek bearing the Grail. The astrology that Islam was bringing back to Europe after it had been driven out several hundred years earlier by Rome can be seen in the symbolism of the West Porch, the fish of Pisces and the twin Templar Knights of Gemini. The pediment also has a fine example of Vesica Pisces, a third eye, or piscus, a third eye that sees the spirit world coming through into the material world. Chartres is a fusion in stone of Islamic mysticism, ancient Celtic spirituality, and Neoplatonic Christianity. Atop a hill honeycombed with ancient tunnels and caves, it is believed to have been built on a site sacred to the mother goddess, a black virgin resonant of the kinship between Isis, mother of the sun god, and Mary, mother of Jesus Christ, can still be seen in the crypt. Set into the floor of it says nave, I'm assuming that is a typo and it's supposed to be cave, is the most famous labyrinth in Europe. Built in 1200, it is some 40 feet in diameter. Before it was taken up to help make cannons in the Church Revolution, a bronze plaque in the center depicted Theseus, Ariadne, and the Minotaur. Okay, I understand that. It's a weird kind of sentence. Okay. One last picture and one last page of reading. So this is, you must reverse directions 7 times but never tread the same path. This spiral, represented in 2 dimensions, is depicted here based on an original drawing by Botticelli. So this is the labyrinth they were just talking about. So you can kind of see. You got to go in here, and you end up going back and forth, and then over. Yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting. It's hard to really see all of it. Um, you'd have to really blow it up and really study it to be able to follow the path of it. But anyway, not important right now. It's just the anyway. Of course, labyrinths and mazes are ancient pagan artifacts, remains of which are found not only at Knossos but at Hawara. That's Knossos, I guess. I don't know. Knossos. O, sorry, Ossos. Um, Found not only at Knossos but at Hawara in Egypt and in the many open air labyrinths and mazes found cut in the turf in Ireland, Britain, and Scandinavia. Many other Christian churches had labyrinths before the 18th century, but these were destroyed because of their pagan associations. One of the burial mounds at Newgrange in Ireland was still called the Spiral Castle by the locals in the 1950s because of a spiral carved by the entry portal. The expression, "our king has gone to the Spiral Castle," was an idiomatic way of saying that he had died. This is the key to understanding the secret symbolism of the labyrinth and of Chartres Cathedral itself. If you enter the labyrinth and follow its track on foot, you find yourself moving in a spiral motion, first to the left, then curving back to the right as you move toward the center. Pilgrims following its route are engaged in a dance like the dance of Jesus described in the Acts of St. John. The aim, as in all initiatory activity, is to enter an altered state in which the spirit journeys up through the spirit worlds, experiencing the after death journey while still alive. Ariadne, who intercedes to help save Theseus, is, in the Chartrian context, Mary, who gave birth to the sun god, and through whose intercession we may give birth to our own higher selves. The labyrinth at Chartres can therefore be seen as a sort of mandala, or aid to meditation and to achieving an altered state. In the sacred geometry of the cathedral, the labyrinth is mirrored by another mandala, the great rose window. The stained glass of the Middle Ages appeared first in Iran, Iraq, in the 11th century. The extraordinary luminescent glass of Chartres was manufactured by medieval alchemical adepts who had learned the secrets of the Arabs and whose techniques we cannot now reproduce. Schwaller de Lubitz, the great Egyptologist, explained to his biographer Andre van den Broek that the brilliant reds and blues of the stained glass at Chartres used no chemical pigmentation, but a separation of the volatile spirits of metals that he tested with the famous alchemist Fulcanelli, and also found in shards of glass he unearthed in Egypt. The rose window, which in its outer circle displays the signs of the zodiac, represents the chakra ablaze as it should be when we reach the center of life's labyrinth, dancing finally to the music of the spheres. Not for nothing has Chartres Cathedral been described as an alchemical crucible for the transformation of humanity. Islam was weaving its way into the fabric of the whole world both esoterically and exoterically. Then, in 1076, Turkish Muslims took control of Jerusalem. And that is the end of that chapter. Um, So we are 55% through the book. So we're up to chapter 18 at that point. So yeah, that was a good couple of chapters, but I can tell I'm getting tired at the end because I can't pronounce things and I stumble more. But anyway, let's see who's around, if anyone, to raid, if you wouldn't mind. Well, damn it, Jim and Janet. Almost nobody is on. Of course, it is later than I normally am going because it was a long reading, another 2-hour reading. So, we'll just call it there, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good night.
Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. Just tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's enough. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. Just tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's enough. Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So find some peace of mind. Not much luck I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Assembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places. Giving up some air to my head. Just tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing in my ears. Not much luck I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places. Giving up some air to my head. Just tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing in my ears. Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes. Wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not much luck I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places. Giving up. Some air to my head. shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not much luck I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's holding on. Not much luck I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's holding on. Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not much luck I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender feel the world collapsing, but it's over. Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's over. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's over. Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now assembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. Just tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's over now. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. Just tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's over now. Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. Just tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Assembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but not lights like I had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love.